Welcome. My name is Hugo Salgero. I'm the Executive Director of VSW here in Batavia, Illinois. We're coming together today to have a conversation about 14 C's in our communities and how does that impact you, me, and everybody that we serve in this community. So join us in this journey as we have a conversation about 14 C's in our communities. And together, we'll figure this out. Thank you for being here. And part of this conversation, we invited some individuals in our community that have a lot of experience and knowledge within their respective fields to give us a broader understanding of what 14 C's means to the community that they serve. So help me welcome. How are you doing today?
Great.
Thank you for being here. Adrian, could you do us a favor and please introduce yourself to our community?
Absolutely. I'm Adrienne Tompkinson, and I have previous experience as a transition teacher working with special education students aged 18 to 22. I have specialty in transition services and working with those individuals to help them become their best selves.
Thank you for being here and thank you for the work you've done in our community and supporting individuals with disabilities. And we also have with us is Laura. Laura, welcome to the table.
Thank you, Ugo. My name's Laura McNeese, and my background is a veteran and a therapeutic recreation specialist. I've worked in this community with a variety of individuals and organizations for the past 20-some years.
Thank you. Thank you for your service to this great nation that we're indebted to you, and thank you for the support that you're giving this community. Thank you. Well, welcome. Welcome. We're here today to talk about 14 C's in our communities. And there's a special reason I think all of us are here at the table. I want to go around the table and share what brings us to talk about this resource, talk about 14 C's. What is that thing inside you says, I need to talk about this?
I think for me, supporting 14C resources and programming is vital for that transition cliff that students experience at age 22. I've seen it as a teacher. Once those services are pulled, families are lost. The students are used to having regular schedules and supports, and without those, they're finding their way in a whole new world. And 14C resources really provide that structure and that safe environment for young adults with disabilities and older adults with disabilities to thrive and find their independence, gain some identity, and really be their best selves. And that's what really draws me to supporting 14C resources and ensuring that these programs are around for generations to come.
Well, thank you. Welcome to the table. We're excited to hear what you have to share on 14 C's. Laura.
I would say I think it's important to look at the history of 14 C's and to know where they came from, and that is through the Veteran Administration, from the returning veterans of World War II who came back injured, maimed, we call it PTSD now. Back then it was shell shock, a lot of mental issues that would happen from being in a wartime scenario. And what the VA was seeing was that they're primarily men, how do we get them back into the community? Men typically identify with their profession and with their job. And how can they go back to working with the injuries or illnesses that they've sustained from this? And in doing that, we saw two professions come out of that, and that's occupational therapy and therapeutic recreation. And with occupational therapy, they look at purposeful activity. And so what we saw coming from that is when people have a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, that they have an activity that fulfills them within themselves, they're happy, they're a part of a community. And so how do we do that? And what happened was we got 14 C's. And so that then brought people who thought that they would never work again or have a life, brought them back into the community and provided a safety net for them to be in the community. So if we look at that beginning, and then that transformed into the 60s, we saw what we could do for veterans who had disabling conditions. What can we do with our general population that have disabling conditions? So it really took, that attitude started to take a lot of that shame and isolation away from families, because we didn't recognize or really accept people with disabling conditions, whether it was something from birth or a traumatic accident as a child. So that they're definitely important.
Well, I think you have a good knowledge of what 14Cs are and the historical value that it provides to this community, and I'm looking forward to engaging in more of those conversations with all that substance. And you know my story of what brought me here and why I'm serving as the executive director of VSW. And prior to coming to VSW, it's no secret, I didn't know what a 14C was. I had no idea. I came to VSW because I was asked to help them figure out what's going on next, right? They want to find their identity, want to do those things. And when I came in, I met with the organization. I stood in the room, and I spent over the past decade of serving a population that's been very marginalized and did not have resources, and dedicated my life to doing those things. And I think standing in the middle of VSW with the board president at that time and talking about how do we continue to have this resource, this specific resource, attainable for this community. And what I seen individuals that were there that weren't working. What they were doing is they were socializing, they were interacting. This was their place to be a part of something. And so to me, what I looked at the time, the work stuff was the stuff on the side. It was the stuff you do in between, right? And coming here and seeing those things and jumping in 2 feet and saying, yeah, let's serve this community, let's figure out what we're doing. Not many people know I Googled after taking the job 14Cs. Yeah, and I'm glad I did it after, because if I would have did it before, I probably would have been scared like everyone else. Like, what am I getting into? Because there is a narrative for 14Cs out there. Steve Jobs is the one that says it. The most important people in the world are the storytellers. And I think what happened with 14Cs is other people were telling their stories. And I wanted to come in here and be able to share the stories for the individuals that are using this resource, the individuals that it impacts the most. And what we had to do is become our own storytellers, tell our own stories. And what we're going to do in this dialogue today is we're going to talk about different stories that people have told, stories that they've told, that they've constructed from not being in a 14C and what they think it means, right? Something I would have constructed just by Googling and be like, ooh, that's what I know. And then we're going to talk about stories of what it is to actually utilize the resource of 14Cs and see how us as social services work to meet the needs of our community with the box so big and nothing in, and how 14C is actually that lifeline to outside the box to bring that resource in. So we want our community to understand that. We want our community to, our listeners today to understand how social services work and social service agencies work. So I want to thank you for being here. We're going to jump right into the rest of these questions and just figure out together what kind of resource this is and what we can do as a community to add more resources instead of taking out resources. So that's how 14Cs was developed, created, the idea behind it. But we didn't see the whole sense of having 14C facilities or programming for the broader community until 1960s. Would either one of you want to share on what happened in 1960s?
Yeah, I would love to. So in 1960s, there was no place inside the community for people with disabilities. You basically were staying home and didn't have anything to do. We did not have the supports that we currently do. So in the 60s, families such as Reverend Johnstone and others banded together to create spaces for their children to learn and thrive. And that is how they came up with sheltered workshops, to provide a space for the community members that really needed it. Instead of sitting at home, they now had purpose, and they now had meaning and identity, and something to belong to. And as we all know, we all crave that. Whether you have a disability or whether you are totally typical, we all crave something to be a part of and something to put our lives towards.
And I think what happened with the VA, it was a nice springboard for recognizing that people can be different and that you can still be active and purposeful even though you have a disabling condition. And what I think is really great about that is that it took a lot of the stigma and shame away from families who had a child with a disabling condition, whether it was something they were born with, or maybe they were hit by a car and now they have traumatic brain injury. Instead of hiding them away as we did for many years in institutions, now we could see, wow, there is value to human life. It comes in all forms, and we can value that. And there is, and just because you have a disabling condition or a disability doesn't mean you aren't a part of our society, a valued part of our society.
I think you hit it on the head right there, talking about a valued part of our society. I think that's what the programs of 14C wanted to create in the 1960s, to create, like you said, purposeful activities. So many of us crave that. We just came through our own little traumatic experience, all of us, through this COVID. And how many of us were sent home, still had jobs, still had income, but did not have that purposeful activity.
Right.
What does that do to someone's mindset or self-esteem or mental health? Can you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. As we all know, we didn't really like being told we had to stay home and be secluded and isolated. However, for people with disabilities, much of their life is being at home and being excluded and isolated. Like you said, Ugo, it didn't matter that we still had a paycheck. Being isolated was not ideal for very many people at all. So what 14C programs have done for our disabled community is bring them out of isolation and give them purpose and something to do with their lives. And like we all experienced, that isolation is not fun. And 14C resources have saved a lot of hours of people being disabled, being isolated.
And providing a safe environment for them to be in. That's so important to their mental health. looking at schools and even workplaces where bullying and being picked on can happen. The one thing with these workshops is that they really work to provide inclusion and a place that they feel safe.
And the big change with that community that happened during the 1960s, right? And sheltered workshops, or 14Cs as referred to. 14Cs was the catapult or springboard for bringing individuals out of isolation, out of institutions. It was the first meaningful activity given to this community. How much other things have developed because of the implementation of 14Cs for this community? Do you like to elaborate on that? I'll take it.
Yeah.
So, 14Cs have been a vital part of this community since the 1960s. And prior to 1960, individuals with disabilities were in an institution or in their bedrooms. They were isolated. They didn't have anything. And in the 1960s, we started sheltered workshops, or 14Cs. And in those first ones that opened up, what they would do is they would do the purposeful activities in the morning, do that kind of engagement, and in the afternoons they would do the recreational. Right? Even our own VSW here, Batavia, would, after doing the purposeful activity in the mornings. In the afternoons, they had a bowling team, they had a swimming team. They would go out and do those things. And from the implementation and the creation of 14 Cs for this community, they created all the other things that we see for the disabled community. Recreational activities, vocational activities, a lot of things that we see out in the community right now is stemmed from the finding and funding of 14 Cs in the 60s.
And it also gave exposure, again, with a safety net in a group so that they were still safe, an exposure to the general population of acceptance. So by having them come out in the community and participating in the community and having those knowledgeable staff people with them to help them to navigate some of those things and educate other people, the general public at large, that has broadened the acceptance of people who have disabilities. And to look at that more as a mainstream and normal and not something,
Right.
got to stay away from that person. Oh, they're in a wheelchair. What does that mean?
Right.
Yeah, so it really brought that about too.
And I think from, going off of your point, sheltered workshops and 14C resources, being a part of the community was really a great example of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it was a really great example of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes.
VSW has been an inclusive environment since its inception. The diversity amongst our partners that we serve is never ending, and the equity that we give to them by providing a space for them to be themselves is just it's the cornerstone of what 14C resources really are.
And it's done a wonderful job of drawing the community in, drawing businesses in, businesses thinking about what can we do to utilize this resource that we have in our community. What can we do? How could it be a beneficial relationship between us? And by doing that, again, you're broadening the whole scope.
Yeah.
14 Cs were created, and you put that as a safety net. It was a safety net for individuals with disabling conditions to have somewhere to go to. If there wasn't for 14 Cs, they would be isolated at home. And 14 Cs are also not just a safety net, but the springboard. Springboard to so many other resources in the community, but the springboard to the individuals too. If they didn't have that opportunity to show that they can be part of a market out there that historically excluded them up until today too. I think with even the American Disabilities Act, we still see an upwards of 70% of people with disabling conditions unemployment rate. So what 14 Cs do as a safety net and springboard, it also acts as a transition place for individuals that can go and participate in the market out in the community. But if they did not have that safety net of 14 Cs, they wouldn't be able to feel comfortable enough to go out to community. So it evolved in the beginning as just a safety net, but then we realized that disabilities are on the spectrum. And those disabilities is how do we serve people from what we have, what we currently have. And the only tool that we had at that time were 14 Cs. And it showed that we can springboard from there to recreational stuff, to employment, to
Community involvement.
So once that's shown that so much can come from here, and in the 60s and 70s, the government saw the value and the important cornerstone that 14 Cs had in this community, that's when they started funding it. Because running a 14C or having this resource for our community is very costly, and you need that's what nonprofits are for, like us, right? Nonprofits go do the thing that the profit world won't do, right? and we're set out to fill a need for our community, and 14Cs filled a perfect need. And the end result of what you get, right, from investing in this community through 14Cs is a value that can't be monetized, because what do we get with that sense of having a job? Right? The sense of being purpose, having somewhere to show up to. Many of us, right, we've in our careers had jobs that paid very little, or internships if you went to college, right? And how much value you got from that because you felt a part of it, right? And that's what 14Cs provide.
And it's concerning that as a resource, we should be adding to our resources, not taking away a
Right.
resource. It's a very valued resource that we need to keep in place to allow every individual their full potential, their level of independence.
Right. I think also providing that opportunity to explore and grow their identity is something that 14C Resources has provided just in a natural way, not something that's forced, but really when an individual comes to and starts participating in a 14C, they're really participating in growing their identity and learning more about themselves and pushing themselves to be their best. And I think that's something that you can't replicate easily. And I think that is one of the main reasons 14C Resources can't be removed, because this community needs it. They need that.
And it's something that is normalized. So their family, whether it's their mom, their dad, their cousins, whoever, they get up and they go to work every day. And so now they get to get up and
Right.
they get to go to work too. So they get to feel like they're it's not they get to feel like, but they are part of
They're
the
participating in the
community.
social norm.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And I want to elaborate on that. You discussed how 14Cs plays this vital role on giving someone access, not just access, a feeling of purpose. Can you discuss a little bit more on what other resource out there for people with disabling conditions, primarily people with cognitive disabilities, that can go access that would give the same amount of mental health or mental stimulation, be for the overall benefit of the individual? Is there anything else out there that matches with the capabilities of 14Cs in that community?
I'm not going to say matches it, but I would say Special Olympics would be another area, because they're in a competitive sport, and so they get to win and lose. So they get to have that feeling too, that they are competing just like any athlete out there, and they get ribbons and they get recognition and applause, and so that's a good feeling.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's about the only thing I can think of right off the top of my head that would be about the same thing of working, that inner part of satisfaction and being a part of something.
Yeah, I think, like Laura said, recreation is a big part of all of our lives, whether you're disabled or not, right? Work hard, play hard. And I think Special Olympics is the play hard. I think the work hard is 14Cs. And
Yes.
I don't see anything else out there that is on par with what 14C Resources are able to provide to that population. If you attend a community day program, that sense of purpose, you don't really get it there. It's fun, but it's not work. It's not part of your identity. It's just something to do. 14C Resources are wholly unique in that aspect of being able to provide the opportunity for not only an income, but also learning and training. You're constantly learning. And there's really not anything else out there besides in the play side of the world that compares to 14Cs for this community.
Talking about that within our own lives, right? Our own lives, how would you feel if let's say in a made up world, or let's say you're part of a world where all your bills are taken care of, and you have nothing you have to worry about. All your living expenses are taken care of, and you did not have to have income or a job, right? And your only thing was to do recreational sports. How long would that last till you want to go get a job?
Ooh, probably not very long for me. I'm a helper. I want to help people. And if I'm only helping myself, it's really not as rewarding as helping other people. So I think I'd probably burn out pretty quickly on the play hard side of things if that was all I could offer.
Well, and if you look at professional sports, okay, there's a shelf life. Okay,
Right.
you can only do this for so long. And look at all, I'm going to use football as an example, but look at all the quarterbacks who retire and keep coming back, or basketball players who retire and keep coming back because they can't figure out something. I mean, they made money at that, so there was some satisfaction there, but they can't quite figure out how do I switch? Same thing with retirement. A lot of times when people retire, they have a hard time figuring out, what am I going to do? I don't feel like I'm a part of anything right now. And so they look for, what can I be a part of? What fits into my personality, my DNA? What can I be? I need to be a part of something. I want to do something. I think that's innate in probably 95% of the human population. There's a few outliers out there, but...
I think I heard recently that you bring up retirees, and there is a statistic out there of how many retirees are re-entering the job market just for a sense of purpose and belonging, not for the financial reasons, but a sense of purpose and being a part of. Retirement is, working is so American. If we don't do it, we don't feel American.
Right.
So I'll share my personal story with that. My husband keeps telling me, you're retired now. And I keep telling people, no, I'm semi-retired because I still work part-time, because I still get a sense of satisfaction with what I do. Even though it's in the recreation arena, I still get a very, huge satisfaction in what I do in working with people for that.
Would you say that it contributes positively to your mental health?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think on the other side of that, how many times have we heard, and we've probably seen that statistic somewhere, of individuals that retire and do nothing? What does that do to their mental health? The ones that retire and just sit in front of a couch and say, I'm going to watch TV now, and don't engage in any social or any purposeful activities. What does that do to their longevity, their mortality rate of those individuals? They do not live as long, and we see that.
I think that when stimulus is taken away, and you become more sedentary or isolated, it really just overall is a downhill spiral. And I think something that 14C resources provide is that stimulation, is that social interaction, is that mental health boost, that independence, that identity building. And so I think that when all of that is taken away, whether you are young and disabled, middle-aged and disabled, or a retired person, when all of that is gone, part of you is also gone.
And you will see that in particular with workplace injuries and things, chronic illnesses and chronic injuries. You will see that if the person can't get back on their feet and engage, they sink into a depression. They get to a point where they no longer want to interact with the rest of the world. And you're right, what is there to live for? So it is. That mental health piece is so important.
Yeah.
So many times when we talk about resources for a community, right, a lot of times these conversations happen with individuals that are not in that community and doesn't know what that feeling is to have those. And I think one of the things we just hit on, what happens when you take away that stimulus from an individual, when you don't longer have that ability to have purposeful activity. We talked about what happens in retirees. We talked about what happens to sports athletes. How many times they come back and forth. We understand those things, but I think within this current environment that we're in, I think we have a few generations that understand it now due to what we just came out of 5 years ago, that isolation.
Yeah.
How many studies have came out of that talking about isolation, and once we were able to, how many companies opened back up and welcomed everybody else, right? It gave birth to remote working, it gave birth to all these other things, but what did we all crave as soon as that opened back up for us? To get back into the office. No matter if it was a 5-minute drive or a 45-minute drive, we all wanted to get back into the office. So would you say that we won't have to imagine what would happen if 14Cs go away? I think we've seen what happened with the world if purposeful activities go away.
And along those lines, mental health in this country, we're always talking about how there needs to be more resources for mental health services, right? Why would we take away a resource that is having a positive effect on people's mental health? Who's going to pick that load up?
I think that 14Cs have done a great job filling that void for people with disabilities, filling that mental health void. If 14C resources are taken away, there's a huge void, and then who's going to step in and fill it? And despite what plans are put in action now, nothing is going to compare with how 14C resources provide mental health for the individuals that utilize it. Nothing. It's going to be taken away. They could be sitting at home. They could be isolated. They could be doing not purposeful activities all day long, and their mental health will suffer, their identity may suffer, and we don't know all of the impact that it will have if 14C resources are taken away. But we know what it's providing now.
Yes.
And being that glimpse of not knowing what the futures of 14Cs would be if they weren't around, to look historically not too far in our history, right? We kind of get a gist of what that does. Didn't mortality rate go up? I think isolation, mental health related trauma went up. A lot of those things went up for the world. And we are talking about a community that has lived in isolation for our history. And 14Cs is what took them out of isolation. With that being said, and looking from a perspective of what would happen with 14Cs if they go away, we're all aware that there's legislation that's trying to eliminate the access to 14Cs. If that legislation would, let's say, take effect here in Illinois, how would that affect the people that are being served at VSW right now?
I think in the most major way, it would affect the participants at VSW by changing their whole world. Right now they have a job they get up for and they go to every day and they love it. The government is saying that they will incorporate community integrated employment where every person with a disability will be supported in a community job. Well, if that was true, we'd all already be working in a community employment and there would be no wait list for Valley Shelter Workshop services. There would be no at capacity for VSW. Everybody would have a job in the community already. But the reality of it is there's not enough support and there's not enough business and money to have every single person with a disability in a community job. And to be quite frank, a lot of people don't want to be in a community employed situation. They like being in the 14C resource program. And who are we to tell them where they have to find employment? It's their choice. And we shouldn't take away the right for them to choose where they go to every day, where they wake up to head to for work every day.
And this has a significant ripple effect. It's not just the participants that are coming to VSW, it's their families, it's impacting their families, and it's the businesses that are a part of VSW that you're providing services for. That all has a ripple effect throughout the community. And not everybody wants to work full-time. I mean, look at our society now. Not everybody in our society works full-time or even part-time. You have stay-at-home parents, you have parents who homeschool, they have choices. They get to choose what they want to do. And that's what we're talking about, having that opportunity to choose what you want to do, what's comfortable for you, what is successful for you.
There's two things I want to ask. I want to go back to Adrian's answer about what would happen. With your experience as a transition specialist, working with that population that was looking to, what do we do after we no longer have support within the educational system? What's the next thing? If you can share with us your experience with that and how many families were impacted by not having a resource,
Sure.
and how many families or individuals did you see, if you can give like a general number of that actually could go out in the community?
Right, from my experience as a special education teacher, we call it the transition cliff. Families realize, oh no, my student is aging out. They're now 21, they're going to be 22 soon. What do we do? Despite having prepared them for this since the age of 14, parents are still clueless as to what their child will do, and they're in a panic. All of a sudden, all of the supports that were provided for their child from the age of birth to 22, the occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy, all of the side things that have supported their child are now gone. And they are unsure of what's my child's next step. Now, the students that I worked with needed a lot more support than your average student. And out of, I'd say, the 23 students I have taught in transition, I would say 3 of those were good candidates for community employment without high support. So that still leaves a lot more students who need support. Now, the options for those families include community day programs, which can cost anywhere between $70 to $120 per day. Another option is a parent retires and stays home with their child. And then you have other options like Valley VSW. And really there are not any other jobs that are just open and welcome arms for nurturing and working with an adult disabled student. So that transition cliff is very real. And we see it all the time in VSW when parents come through and tour with their students. They are so hopeful and glad that they found a resource where they can envision their child thriving and not sitting at home. And giving them that hope is really an amazing thing to be able to do. They thought their child would be just sitting at home with them, and they're trying to work from home, but they can't because their child needs something. But giving them that hope that, there is more for your child, they can do more. And it can be here at this 14C resource if you and your family choose.
If understanding the importance, and you brought up choice, and you talked about what are the choices that they have, and those choices sounded very expensive. Something I found out through working in this community and working specifically with this population is how expensive it is to have disabilities in America. How expensive it is. There is. In talking about the cost and the cost associated to having disabilities in America, can Can you elaborate, either one of you, on that burden that it puts on families? And I hate to use the word burden, but that hardship. Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate on the hardship it puts on families once an individual ages out of the school system?
Well, let's talk a little bit before they do, because I think families who have a child or more than one child who has a disability, that is hard on the family. And I'm not sure what the divorce statistics are, but I know a number of the people I've worked with, the parents are not together anymore. So you've got that pressure that you have to deal with. And remember too, these families are having to transport and care for, and until they get to that age 22, that's an awful lot that they have to take on. And while there are a lot of resources, there still is not enough.
Right.
It's difficult and stressful, definitely stressful on the families. When they hit that age 22, not only are they floundering to find what are we going to do next, but a lot of times there are wait lists for these programs. It's not just boom, call somebody and get them in. There could be a long wait list. And then are they appropriate for that program? Because everybody has their own assessment system, and who can we take in, and how close is the program that you find to you.
Yeah.
So again, it's an added burden on all these families.
I know from my experience at VSW, we've had a number of families come to us and have had this huge financial burden of paying for a day program, not even for 5 days a week, but for 3 days a week, that basically equate to the price of a second mortgage or paying rent again. And these are working class families. Mm-hmm. These are not families that have huge vasts of resources. We are lucky because we are in a suburban area. However, much of our country is rural. Mm-hmm. So these services that we are used to being close to us or having transportation or businesses to work with, our rural communities don't have that option.
And that's a really good point.
Yeah, their options are so much more limited, and they travel so much farther, and their options just aren't there, that basically anything that's out there, day service or whatever, that's the only thing. That's the choice. Whether it's appropriate or not is not always the first consideration, because it is the only option. Mm-hmm. And those places then place a financial burden on the family for being there. And oftentimes it's, well, I could quit my job and not work, or I could pay for my child to be in a supported environment. And it is costly. Being an adult with disabilities is expensive. And I hate to say it, but Illinois is, I think, 49th on the list of benefits for people with disabilities. When you turn 18, it's recommended that you get put on something called the PUNS list. And PUNS stands for the Prioritization of Urgent Needs. You are often on that PUNS list for more than 4 years before you get pulled to receive PUNS services. And that's in the state of Illinois. Other states, their PUNS list does not take 4 years to be pulled from. It can be up to 6 years. So you're waiting in this interim, and your family is providing the financial burden to take care of, whether that means a home health aide, whether that means a waiver to go to a day program. Your family is now taking on that burden until you can be pulled from the PUNS list and state funds can be dispersed for you. So it's really unfortunate that in the state of Illinois, we are ranked 49th and as far as services go for people with disabilities.
Wow. You touched on a couple things, and it makes me think of this current situation that we're in. We're facing possibly losing 14Cs, right? The individuals are advocating to lose 14Cs, and our experience has showed us that how important to have all resources for the community. And I want to get your take and help me explain to our audience about how 14Cs is part of that continuum of care for individuals with disabling conditions. Talking about how you had many families, and some were individuals were able to do community supportive work. Some individuals would not be able to do anything. They had higher set of needs. And then you had that individuals that a facility or a program like 14Cs that VSW has would have been perfect for. If we can elaborate more on the importance of having all those resources for our community.
Yeah, just like disabilities, it's a spectrum. Not one place is right for everyone. 14Cs are not right for everyone. But so
just like employment,
just like
full-time employment,
community
is not
employment is not right for everyone. There's such a spectrum of need that are options for 14Cs and everything else. It should be a choice and it should be available for everyone. And the voices of the people who are saying that 14C resources should be eliminated are not looking at it as a spectrum. They're looking at it as a one-size-fits-all. And we know that in today's society, being individualistic and everybody getting what they need and what they want is really important. And that doesn't exclude the disabled community.
And so if you look at the non-disabled community, you have people who want to work from home, who can work from home because they have a talent that they can do that. You have people who want to be social and be, in a workplace environment. Just like the continuum for people with disabling conditions, we have, the good thing about the pandemic is that it has opened up more for people to work from home. So if you have people who don't do well with a lot of changes, but they're really good at computer stuff, then they can be worked with to be able to set that up to work from home and get those supports in place to do that. You have the social setting where people can come in and do their work. With that, you can also use 14Cs to see if someone is capable of doing community work. So you can take those assessments and you can look at the jobs and you can do that job coaching, and that can be another springboard. That can be part of community employment and not just community employment or nothing.
And to go off of that, 14Cs are a great springboard for community employment. However, if that community employment does not work, we have the safety net of 14Cs.
Yes.
If you try something and you want to work in the community and that doesn't work, rather than being sent home without a job, there's 14C resources that you can fall back on, and we will be there to catch you and lift you up.
That's
and
a great
you've
point.
had people at VSW who do community work, but they choose to come into VSW and work there too.
You have led me into a great point. What I want to do now is we're going to take a break, and we're going to talk to one of the individuals that VSW is part of his life, and ask him. So thank you. We'll come back right after this. Welcome back. Thank you for being here. We're having a conversation about 14Cs in our communities. And we thought it would be best to have someone from our community that has experience with 14Cs tell you about their experience. So let me introduce Mitch. Mitch, welcome.
Hi.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How you
You
doing?
doing good? Good. I'm glad you're here with us. I'm glad you're joining us. And you took time out of your busy day to be here with us. So
Yes,
thank
I
you.
did.
Yes, you did. Mitch, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm an easygoing guy, fully outgoing. One of the things I like to do is listen to music and stuff, but that's besides the point. What I do at the workshop is job. It's more of like a job place where everybody's more welcome. Because of our own separate disabilities. So it's sometimes it can be a little hard, get around a little, but it's more easy than anything else. But because there's so much we can relate to on so many levels. So.
You tell us a little bit about yourself. You tell us what you do at the work at VSW. What's one of your favorite things to do at VSW?
That could be anything. That could be like FedEx boxes, anything that keeps my mind going.
And what does VSW mean to you?
What does it mean to me? For me, it's more of a easy common ground for me. It keeps my feet grounded as much as possible as I can. But it's mostly means to me the most is making friends with people, getting along and stuff. Coming to that point of agreeing on half the things that we can relate on, and just pretty much that I treat people like family. It's pretty much what I do, because I love being around people, and it's all about giving. So,
speaking of giving, I heard today was a special day at VSW. I heard you gave something away too. What happened today at VSW?
I actually gave a friend a slice of pizza because it's his birthday.
What? That is amazing.
Yeah.
It's very amazing because Mitch does not share his pizza.
Well, I don't share too much of a lot of my foods too much with people, but that's me being me.
And how many friends do you have down there at VSW?
A lot more than one.
More than one?
It's like more than 5. It's hard to count. It's hard to keep track of count.
What do you and your friends talk about all day when you're at VSW?
We pretty much talk about everything. What we like with our interest, and well, pretty much anything. If there's like any problems, we just come out and chill. And we always have that communication where we can just meet each other halfway. Getting along at all times. It's just. And I've been friends with some of these people for a long time, since like high school and college. I mean, it's been quite of a while for me, and it's to this point of my family, and I'm fully beloved by that.
You shared with me that where you see yourself in the future, and how has VSW changed that for you? How do you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years?
I'm not the type of person that predicts the future too much. I usually keep that to myself, but it's just some kind of a job where I can just make a living off of, make a living of my own someday. It's pretty much it. I mean, I would like to raise a family of my own someday, because I like kids a lot. Though they're a lot more easier going than I'm usually am myself alone. So I'm just happy to think a lot about things like that. So,
Mitch, since I met you, you've done some new things with VSW. What's one of the new things that you've done?
One of the new things I've done, there was a time that we had the microscopes. That was kind of new to me at a time when we had them. The one thing that was kind of special to me about that job is that it pays more, because it's all you gotta do is just inspect, the smallest thing inside the styrofoam, and I always enjoyed that.
Thanks. And one last thing I want to ask you about is the new stuff that you're doing outside of VSW, like the new places you work at. How cool is that?
Which one?
Kiss the Sky?
Oh.
What did you do today?
Kiss the Sky, it's pretty much the same as always. Everything, expecting, organizing things, just make sure the work was in the right place. And that's pretty much all I do. it's not a, well, I mean, a friend of mine, Tegan, works at Christmas Sky along with the owner, Steve. He actually helps me a little just to, make sure, just to make sure that everything's in the right place. And he's a great guy. I love him. So.
One last thing, Mitch. Anything you want to say to our viewers?
If you have any questions, just be free to ask.
Thank you. I think I can go ahead.
I'm willing to answer.
Willing to answer.
I'm too much of an open book.
What do you think people should know about VSW?
Can I be a little sarcastic?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just go to Hugo. He's the one that takes the spotlight away from me. Just go to him.
All right. I think that's a good place to close. I'll take that spotlight from you right now, and I want to thank you for coming out and being with us and sharing your experience. We thank you for everything you do, and we're glad to be part of that family.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. And thank you for joining. We're going to take a break, and we'll come back and answer some more questions. Thank you. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us on our conversation with 14Cs in our communities. You just met Mitch, one of our participants within the VSW community, and isn't he just a treat? And
Oh, yes.
he's exciting.
He sure is.
His love and aspirations and horizons have I seen working with Mitch just grow because of potentials that 14C gives someone. To be able to see it firsthand is amazing. So what I want us to do is talk about, there's legislation that's being proposed to take away 14Cs. And everybody knows 14Cs is a hot button topic right now, right? It's from sea to shining sea, they're talking about 14Cs. And what we want to do is we want to focus it more home for us. We're here in Illinois, and Illinois, I always call us Illinoisans the pioneers, right? We kind of set, I don't know if it's because Chicago's here, right? But we kind of set a lot of precedent in Illinois, and Illinois look to and how to engage other communities and bring them in and give support for those. Illinois, I champion us Illinoisans and our legislators and our communities for understanding and how to bring resources for our community, different communities, right? And there's legislation I know you both heard about, and our communities probably heard about, legislation that seeks to take away a resource from this community. And from our understanding, or from your understanding, how would that affect our community if a vital resource such as 14Cs, this continuum of care, right, and speaking on a spectrum, how would that affect the people you serve in the community?
Mm-hmm. If the proposed legislation were to go through, we would see an increase in unemployment for people with disabilities. We would see an increase in isolation. We would see a decrease in mental health. And ultimately, it would be disbanding something that this community has worked to since 1966 to create. And from my perspective, I don't see any reason why a resource that has given so much to our community and to this specific population would be eliminated.
My concern is that while the legislation addresses, the current proposed legislation addresses that there would be an assessment process to determine, who would qualify for community employment, there is nothing, there's no studies that show how many people this is going to affect who don't make it into community employment. And what happens to those people? And part of that, from what I was reading in the proposal, is that if you don't make the cut for community employment, you're looking at a day program. And again, there's already limited resources on day programs. They can be incredibly expensive for the families to have to do. And is that purposeful activity for the individuals in those day programs? I have been a part of the community with those resources for 20 plus years, and day programs are not necessarily the answer for people for purposeful activities. And that concerns me. It concerns me. I spoke with a father over the phone because he had his adult child who was in a 14C program. After the pandemic, they did not bring that program back. His loved one was placed in a day program, and he talked to me about the difference, the depression that he sees with his child now because there is no purposeful activity. Mm-hmm. And the joy that this individual got from being part of a 14C program is no longer there, and it concerns him. And if that's happening with this person, how many other families is this going to affect? We don't have answers to that. I want answers before we move forward and take a resource away.
Absolutely. And I would like to argue as well, there are states who have eliminated 14Cs. Mm-hmm. I have not heard any positive things from those states about the participants who were a part of a 14C and no longer are. What I've mostly heard is about how they are now isolated. And again, not all communities are rich in resources like we are in Batavia, Illinois. Those rural communities, you can't just send someone to a day program that's 45 minutes away. And they might not want to be at a day program. But I would like to know what has happened in those states where 14Cs have been eliminated.
And you bring up a really good point, Adria, because there is also no evidence that it works.
Right.
There's no evidence that has come back. There's no reports. There's no studies that say, wow, this is really working. We've got nothing.
Right.
I don't...
Sorry.
I don't think that that's a good enough reason to eliminate a resource. Mm-hmm. I think there needs to be more studies done, that we need to see what the impact has been on those communities.
Absolutely.
To know what we're facing here.
Yeah. And if, like they say that there will be funding provided for 14C resources that are transitioning away, and there'll be support for those people for competitive employment. I want to see the numbers on the states who have done it, because what I'm looking at right now is a room full of people who are going to be sitting at home, who are no longer surrounded by their friends while they're working, who no longer have that interaction and that independence that they get from being a part of a 14C resource. I would like to know what's going to happen to the 35 individuals that we currently serve and the 17 that are on our wait list. What's going to happen to them? The other programs that are available for them also have wait lists. Mm-hmm. So you can't say that they're going to go to a community day program even if they don't want to, because there's no room. There's simply no room. And there's not anything solid put in place to transition people away from 14C resources right now.
I don't think we have to wait and see what happens. I think we have cases within our current environment, right? We have that one family that came to us, the young man that was doing community integrative employment through another organization. And what the story we heard from the family is he was working in maintenance with an individual and being out in the community and loved it. And this individual takes he needs extra support, and the person that he was partnered with to work with gave him the extra support, and it was a great experience for him. And what happened was the individual that was doing one-on-one with him moved out of town, so no longer was there for the agency, and they no longer had that space for him. And the answer for them, when he went to apply to be community integrated, the application process that already currently exists, they said, yeah, he does not make that cutoff or those parameters for them to be able to place him in permanent supportive, community supportive work programs, right? Or not even community supportive work, but those transition programs. He didn't qualify for that. But they told the families that he qualified for day programs. And that family, for 3 days a week, where he was at, and one of them had to change their schedule so they could be with him on those other days, were paying upwards of $900 a month for a day program, where himself in that day program, he had too much energy to be held within that environment. So it was a strain on him, it was a strain on the family, and when the family found out about VSW and came and joined us, they said that their son loves to partake in meaningful activities, purposeful activities as we put them. Once he joined, that family no longer had that burden of that second mortgage. Mom and dad were able to engage with their son in a more pleasant relationship than trying to manage his behaviors. And I'll tell you from my experience at VSW, he has been an amazing addition to all the members that are currently there, because the joy and I could tell you he likes work, but that's not the main reason he's there. He's there to just engage in what Mitch was telling us earlier, that friendship, that socialization, and just being a part of something else. If this wasn't here and the family couldn't afford that second mortgage, he would be at home isolated all day long by himself.
Along those lines, Ugo, I've worked a lot with agencies in our area that provide either the job coaching or community employment opportunities or the day programs. And I have found that they get to pick and choose. So I worked with one individual who ran into a little bump in his community employment, and the employer did not want to have to fire this individual, but they didn't have a choice. And trying to link that individual up with one of the agencies, one of the organizations to work with, come to find out this individual had a permanent ban. And we're talking about something that may have happened like 10 years ago. So we don't know what hurdles folks are going to have to get through to be able to be a part of that. It's not just the wait list. It's what else are they going to, what other hurdles are they going to put in their way? And what's going to disqualify you?
Right.
You know, you're in this program, but oops, you did a boo-boo, now you're out.
And then what?
Exactly.
And then they fall, and there's no safety net, and they become isolated, and their mental health suffers, and their family relationships suffer.
Mm-hmm.
We discussed earlier about how services are on the spectrum, and in our original conversation when we started talking about the history of 14Cs, of how this was the nucleus that started all these other resources for this community. Mm-hmm. Have you noticed that since its inception and the creation of other services, that originally funding was coming through 14Cs to fund everything else? As disabilities were on the spectrum, did you notice that how funding became on the spectrum and they no longer needed 14Cs and they started creating all these other things? What we've noticed is that as individuals, and I think Adrian hits on it, all the individuals don't fit into one size fits all, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody needs a part of that continuum of care. And once they found that those other continuum of cares, other parts of this spectrum were there, it seems like the funding has been taken away from 14Cs to fund those. And if you're familiar with legislation that has come through in not just Illinois, but going through other areas, every legislation feels that they're just after the funding for 14Cs. And they give it a narrative that they're doing something right for the community. But in what decision of taking a resource from a community has ever been right? Historically, we've been a nation that looks and sees how we can add rights. How can we give people more access? And with 14Cs, that gives more access. And what these companies or these organizations are doing, just trying to get the funding, do you feel that they are purposely misrepresenting what 14Cs are to communities?
I think absolutely 14Cs are being misrepresented. I know from my own experience as a teacher, it was recommended to me that I don't ever recommend one of my students be a part of a 14C resource because we just don't do that. And now the table has turned because the same people who were saying we don't put our students in 14C resources are now asking VSW to sit in IEP meetings as an outside resource available to their family once they transition out of the public school system. I think that the 14C resources and the funding for it have been historically underfunded, and now that funding's going to be wholly taken away. And as you guys know, VSW is unique in that we do not seek or take federal or state funding. We are 100% community funded, which is not true for all the other sheltered workshops in the state of Illinois and across the US. So for that resource that has been utilized since the 60s to be taken away, and for that right to be taken away is huge. It's extremely impactful for the families that utilize 14C resources. It's extremely impactful to the participants who benefit from it, and in addition to the businesses and the community members that benefit from the existence of 14C resources. If that funding is pulled, that right to choose is gone, then what's next? What's going to get pulled next?
That's a good point.
And we're already talking about limited resources. It always seems to be the people who have the fewest resources we're all fighting over the same thing when we should all be working together on this. And as you were talking, Adrian, it just kind of helped me to reflect back on how we ended up warehousing people in institutions, and how is this really any different? Because what happens when your community employment, that person can no longer do community employment, now they're going to a day program. And so now we're ultimately warehousing people, but in a different situation. And that's concerning to me, because I've always been about people being able to rise to their level of independence and ability, and we're taking that away. And that just doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah.
And I think we've learned from our experience working in social services that what they do is with all social services, they throw us in a box, right?
Yep.
And it's this huge box with nothing in it, and say, serve the community. So what we do is we try to find ways that are outside of our box that we can reshape them to serve the community we have. And I think 14Cs have done it very well. And what's happening is rightly so, other parts of social services needs funding. And instead of the government, right, and instead of them bringing the funding, because they said we don't have funding, they say, here, fight for the little bit we do have. And that's what happens within social services.
Yep.
Social services are pitted against each other and saying what you're doing is not right, what we're doing is better, so we can just fight for this limited resource. And it's funny how our government always says there's no money until they want to do something. And then there's unlimited funds. And as a community, Adam Smith, right, the grandfather of capitalism, he says the health of a nation can be shown through how do we take care of our most vulnerable.
Yes.
And if you look through that lens, currently our state is not that healthy.
Right.
So, bringing upon the issues that we're facing within our own social services and providing these services, how do we work together with other social services to make sure that everybody has access? What's the answer?
Ooh.
Well, I think the first thing is inviting everybody to the table, because that did not happen with this.
Right.
Oh,
They-
what happened?
They were excluded. There were 14C holders that were not invited to this table. And you have organizations who are trying to balance their budgets and balance what's good for their organization, not necessarily what's good for the people they're serving. And I think we always need to keep that first and foremost. You know, because if we have 50 people in our 14C program, and we're going to look at doing away with the 14C program, how many of those 50 people are going to be able to move forward into community employment? Who are we leaving behind, and what are we doing to get them to rise to their level of independence and ability? Not just putting them off to the side. It kind of reminds me of nursing homes. You know, just kind of park the wheelchair in the hallway, you know, and let's get on with our routine, our day. You know, we got to feed people, we got to get them to bed, we got to give them their meds, but not really looking at the individuals.
You know what they're saying out there too. There's these alternative services. You've heard, and I've heard. We heard from the people. There's no funding out there for those alternative services. For at-home care, there's no funding for that. For community integrative employment, right? How financially does it cost to give stability for one person, right? There's no funding for that, and that's what I'm hearing. There's no funding for these things. So if there's no funding for these, and we all know that, why would they want to push forth a bill that takes away something that we can serve so much of a community with so little? Isn't that what nonprofits are made for?
Yes.
And
I'm sorry.
and at VSW, we are not in the business of making products. We are in the business of building people. We are not making a profit off of the work that our partners do. We are reaching outside of our box and using the curriculum that the business community provides to us to give meaningful activities and purpose to our participants. And that doesn't cost a whole lot. But if we are told from the government that we are no longer allowed to do that, they are then basically saying that they have the means and the wherewithal to replace that, which we all know is not true.
And aren't we being currently told that? We say government, but it's the legislators that are pushing legislation to take this valuable resource. So those legislators are telling us, we want you to go serve, but not with the resources that you've been doing since 1938.
Yeah, but who's behind those legislators?
Yeah.
Okay, again, inviting everybody to the table. There is so much we can accomplish when we all come to the table together. If you're having issues, let's talk about it with your agency. If you're having issues with your 14C program, let's brainstorm and talk about things and figure out a way for your 14C program, what could be some things that could work. Because we're all different. Like you stated, Adrian, we have some urban, suburban areas, and then we have the rural areas. So it's not a one-size-fits-all, but I think coming together and lifting each other up, that's the solution.
Yeah.
You brought up a good point. Who's behind these legislators? I think a lot of times we don't think about who's behind legislators. And we tend to blame the legislators, but in this case, we've spoken with other 14Cs and other agencies that want to keep 14Cs, and they're actually did not realize that they're funding the lobbyists that are pushing this. Mm-hmm. They're like, why are we funding something that goes against our interest for our community? And a lot of them are questioning that. Why is that? And we've all heard the narrative that no, 14Cs won't go away, but when you go read the text, it says 14Cs go away.
Well, and I think some organizations thought it was a foregone conclusion
Right.
that this legislation had passed.
Yep. We've spoken with 14C resources as recent as 2 weeks ago who were unaware that this law has not gone into effect. They were told by other agencies or other government officials that, the elimination of 14Cs has happened, so you might as well figure out an alternative route as recently as 2 weeks ago. And what we've been able to do is reignite that fire for saving this resource. Like, it's not over yet. We can still be in this fight together.
Yes.
Yes.
And so the misinformation, I think, that has been put forth from the legislature and from the government side of the eliminating of 14C resources has been detrimental to as a collective 14C resources in the state of Illinois. And it's very unfortunate that that narrative has been put forth, but that's why we're here.
Yes.
It is very imperative that we share that, right, and let individuals know that it's still here. It's the narrative that they have behind what 14Cs are, and that it's a labor or if it's work and those things. And I think the genius of our legislators from the 1930s, right? We always want to think any generation next we're smarter than the last, but look at what they did. They helped social services, our veterans, reach back and reach outside their box, reshape something that they cannot attain on their own, right? What happens to all of us if we're not producing in our job? They find someone else that does.
Right.
So they said, let's go reshape what's outside the box for these individuals to get that same feeling of what it was. And it's more of a relationship and a partnership with Department of Labor to help reshape that commodity that wasn't created for us, right? Reshape it for this community to have the positive benefits that come with being part of a family. Mm-hmm. Not supporting a family,
No.
but being part of a family,
Yes.
right? And that's what it's doing. And I think I think the advocates for the bill are being so loud on the other side that they're not hearing that this isn't work.
And just to go off of that point, Ugo, those advocates are very loud, and the people that they are advocating against often are those who can't speak for themselves. They may be nonverbal. They may have a communication disorder. And it's very unfortunate that those people advocating against them are not considering the fact that those people may not have a voice. And we are here to have that voice for them. And we're here to bring others together and their family members and their supporters to have that voice for them, to speak up and to be loud against those lobbyists and against those legislators, because they don't have the voice to do it themselves. And we need to band together as a state, but as a nation as well, to be the voice for the most vulnerable population in our state of affairs at the time. And we gotta do it together. It's the only way.
And I think we need to demand from our legislators not to just sign on to a bill because, ooh, this sounds really great, and we have, this side of the argument, okay? We need them to do their research too. Mm-hmm. We need them to ask questions. We need them to say before they go, oh yeah, I'll sign on, no problem. We need them to ask questions and to say, how is this going to impact people who may not be able to qualify for community employment? What are the assessments you're going to use? How is this going to develop, and how do we know it's successful? If, 14 other states have done this? Then where are all their success stories? Because I've not been able to find anything. I've been on the internet looking for stuff, and like you, Adrienne, the only thing I've been finding are negative things from families who have said, my loved one did not qualify for this. Right. And this is where we're at now, and I'm not happy.
Right.
So you brought a great point. I think it's something that we can give to our audience to help understand how do we keep this vital resource for our community? What are ways that they can advocate?
I think the biggest way that they can advocate is to talk to their elected officials, talk to your local representatives, talk to, give them a call, give your representatives a call, let them know. There are people on the other line that are taking notes on your opinion. And
hit social media.
Yeah.
Hit it hard.
Use your social media. Shout from the rooftop.
Yes.
And
yes.
I think what's very important about what currently they're trying to take away from this community, it's not a community-specific resource. I think all of us in every aspect of our lives, young, old, no matter where we come from, we can understand what it means to be isolated. And that's what they want to do. They want to take a whole community and send them into isolation.
Yeah.
So I think we don't need just the families of people that had experience with this. I think all of us as Illinoisans, as Americans, understand what isolation is. And I think all of us can call our legislators and use the power of the vote and let them know you're not going to take away things from our community.
And we need to remember and advocate, this is a federal program. 14Cs are federal, they're not state. Why would we eliminate a federal resource? I mean, you can choose not to use it.
Right.
That's a choice. You can choose not to use it. But why, as a state, would we completely eliminate it? That makes no sense to me.
And I read something earlier today, speaking of social media, that a friend of mine posted, and it said, we're all one car accident away from being disabled. Think about if you got in an accident. You could no longer utilize your arms or your brain the same way you did. Being at home and being isolated is an option, but being and utilizing a resource like 14Cs is also an option. And we don't want that option to be taken away.
Who of us wants any of our options taken away? Or our choices?
I'm American. I want all my choices.
Thank you.
And my rights.
And my rights. And you're not going to do those things. And I think that leads us today of understanding and having a perspective of not having to wait what happens when you take away rights and resources from communities. We have seen that. We have seen that what happened to our vets returning from World War II in 1938. What happened to them when they didn't have this? They tried rehabilitation, they tried everything else, that didn't work, so they're like, let's just give them access. And they gave them access, and it took us out of a Great Depression. What happened in the 1960s when this community was given access to those things? It shut down those horrible institutions that we are inhumane to keep people at. And they gave them an aspect to be a part of a community. And we've seen what that happens. We've seen what happens when you lock all of us up for COVID and you said, here, stay at home. We'll give you all the money. Money's no problem. They were able to print money for that. Said, stay home. How do we feel? We know what that is. So we don't have to sit here and pretend we don't know what this looks like when you take away resource from a community that has been historically excluded from all resources. So we know what that means. I want to thank you for being here and help me understand that, helping our audience understand that this is a resource not just for that community, but this is a resource from all of us. I think you ended that pretty well of we're all a car accident away from needing this resource. So don't let them take this resource from you. Don't let them take it from our community. What you can do is you can go online to your legislator, get their number, you can call them. They will listen to you. You are in charge. We are in America that's a nation for the people, by the people. So us people can get up there and tell them we need our resources. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you too for being here and sharing your experience with us and helping us keep resources in our community. Thank you, and you have a good day.